Tonight on Bridge City News, it was day 3 of the Stephen trial in Lethbridge. Reporter Naveen Day will have the latest for us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says many of the Alberta wildfires is because of climate change, but Alberta Premier Jason Kenney disagrees. And this is the eve of the 75th anniversary of D-Day. We hear from veterans who were among 14,000 Canadians who stormed the beaches of Normandy.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. It was day 3 of the Stephens court case at the Lethbridge Provincial Courthouse. David and Colette Stephen are being charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life for their son Ezekiel, who died of bacterial meningitis in 2012. The couple was originally found guilty in 2016. However, the Supreme Court of Canada ordered a new trial. Video journalist Naveen Day has been following the story closely and is at the courthouse. Nav, what's the latest?
Thanks, Hal. This morning we heard testimony from Kenneth Trunowski with Alberta Health Services. He had been asking AHS for over a year to properly stock the ambulances in rural Alberta. He says that they were improperly equipped. I wasn't able to talk to Trunowski because he's still under cross-examination, but I was able to reach out to David Stephen, who gave us a recap of how it went down this morning.
He said he had been requesting for about a year to get the proper equipment into that ambulance. And so it was extremely frustrating to him when this situation occurs, where my son dies largely as a result. And I say largely as a result because there's other stuff that's going to come out in the court case here that's quite telling. But he dies largely as a result of hypoxic injury, where they couldn't get an airway for him. And so he's up on the stand and he's just letting it all out in regard to what took place surrounding the lack of equipment that he had been complaining about for quite some time. And it's just disheartening that it took my son's passing away for Alberta Health Services to take it seriously enough that they would actually put the proper equipment in the ambulances a week after my son died.
Thanks so much. That's our video journalist Naveen Day joining me from the Lethbridge Courthouse. A Calgary couple found guilty in the death of their 14-month-old son has been sentenced to 32 months in prison. Jennifer and Jeremy Clark were convicted last fall of criminal negligence causing death and a failure to provide the necessaries of life. The court heard that their son John did not see a doctor until the day before he died from a staph infection in November of 2013. Prosecutors argued that Clarks waited too long to take the boy to the hospital. They say their sentence should send a message of denunciation and deterrence. A 55-year-old Lethbridge man has been charged with 5 commercial break-and-enters over the past 2 weeks. Between May 16th and June 2nd, police say Larry Brent Ovens broke into various businesses, resulting in $20,000 worth of losses. Businesses affected included the Highlands Pet Hospital, Mr. Lube South and West, Safeway Liquor, and the Great Canadian Oil Change. Ovens has been charged with shop breaking and theft. He is scheduled to appear in court on June 11th. Bill C-71, the federal Liberals' controversial anti-gun bill, passed in the Senate recently. It appears as though the federal government does not want Canadians to own guns, and Bill C-71 is the first step. Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder has been fighting for responsible gun owners, and she joins me now via Skype from Ottawa. Rachel, you got thousands of signatures on an online petition from people who opposed C-71. Was it all for naught? What does this now mean for farmers, ranchers, and others who own guns in our country?
This bill really concerns me. It concerns me because the Prime Minister is instilling fear in Canadians and telling them that they are that we don't have proper restrictions already in place, that people are not properly vetted in order to own and operate a firearm. And that's simply just not the case. The other thing that the Prime Minister is doing is he's putting out false information to people by saying that somehow Bill C-71 is going to create greater safety and protection for Canadian citizens within our communities. And it's just not true. At the end of the day, criminals do not go through the process of acquiring a firearm by getting a license. And really, this legislation is going to target those individuals who rightfully own and use their firearm, in a legal manner.
Some people are saying, unlike the United States, Canadians do not have the constitutional right to bear arms, and C-71 is a good thing. How do you respond to that?
Right now in Canada, individuals, they take a safety course, they have to write a test, and then they have to be thoroughly vetted, and then they're granted a license that allows them to acquire and use a firearm. Those are some incredibly strict regulations within our country. But then because those regulations are in place, and once those expectations are met, Canadians do have the right and the ability to acquire a firearm.
Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder, thanks again for joining me from Ottawa.
Thanks, Hal. It's good to be with you.
The University of Lethbridge has a new Dean of the Faculty of Arts. She is Dr. Mary Ingram. She's currently the Director of Sound Studies Institute and a Professor of Musicology in the Department of Music at the University of Alberta. Ingram is originally from Nova Scotia and began playing piano at the age of 3. As the daughter of an Anglican minister, she honed her skills by playing for and singing in church choirs. Ingram and her husband David Owen, who's a professional oboist, will make the move to Lethbridge later this fall. Today is World Environment Day, and Lethbridge was named one of Canada's cleanest shorelines. The Helen Schuler Nature Centre has organized 30 coulee cleanups since 2014. They say one of their biggest concerns over the years has been discarded cigarette butts.
Through our campaign with the shoreline cleanup, we recognize that cigarette butts represent the largest item by quantity. And this is a terrible reality for the wildlife that live in our river valley, and certainly poses a great safety concern for our city. Since the start of our coulee cleanup campaign alone, we've had 8,400 volunteers take part in removing 4,572 bags of garbage. So when we look at the coulees and when we enjoy this wonderful space throughout the river valley, we can thank all of those volunteers that have made it as beautiful as it is today and helped to maintain it.
The Nature Centre has joined forces with Ocean Wise and the World Wildlife Federation Canada to raise awareness for World Environment Day. As technology changes, it becomes a lot easier for farmers to network. A national company out of High River called Farmers Business Network hosted their summer clinic in Lethbridge today. The company is an independent network that provides exclusive data and information for many in the farming industry.
So the app is to have easy access right off their phone. They can have record keeping on their farm. They can check prices locally, what growers are paying. They can price shop around, order chemical off their phone. They can see what data is shown locally and how we can overcome it, and just have kind of see what's working locally and what's not working locally. Technology is growing more and more every day, and the more efficient you can be, I think the better your farms will be more managed. I just think if you're more managed and more efficient, you're going to be more better off.
If you're interested in joining the network, you can check out their website at farmersbusinessnetwork.com. The Galt Museum addressed how rumors, misinformation, and misunderstandings contaminate our communities. Officials say left unchecked, misinformation can create opposition for people from diverse backgrounds.
We have a special exhibit right now at the Galt Museum and Archives called Places and Traces, Our Neighborhoods. So this is an exhibit we did in collaboration with the Lethbridge Historical Society. And we decided we have programs that go along with the exhibit, and I was looking to have a presentation about how we can create a welcoming and diverse community. So today at our program we have Tamara Shikulski, who works with the City of Lethbridge as a diversity and inclusion consultant, and she's here to talk about some of the myths that are about people in our neighborhoods and some of the ways that we can get to know the people in our neighborhoods.
Shikulski says in order to foster positive interactions between each other, we must identify the myths and be prepared to counter them with facts. As the mercury climbs, so do the dangers for pets. Unfortunately, many pet owners still leave their dogs in their cars on hot days, putting the animals at risk. Leaving a pet unattended in a car can have devastating consequences, as the mercury inside of a vehicle can reach deadly temperatures in a very short period of time.
We get these calls every year. Without a doubt, it's always going to happen. We don't want to get the calls, and people often come to us with questions about like what happens and do the laws need to be changed. And I think personally it's just pet owners need to think about the consequences of leaving an animal inside of a vehicle. The circumstances that can go from the dog being fine to the dog being dead can change so quickly. The weather in this province, especially southern Alberta, changes so frequently that you may be leaving the house thinking I'm just stopping in for 5 minutes, but within 5 minutes the weather can change. There's a lot of factors that go into what causes an animal to become distressed inside of a car. Leaving a dog inside of a car is not an offense, and it's the changing temperatures that create the issue. The internal temperature, once it hits about 41 degrees, that's when you start having organ failure, brain damage, and eventually death.
Despite these pleas, animal welfare and law enforcement agencies receive reports of pets being left in cars each and every year. Pleurit says you should not leave your furry friend confined in a vehicle in any type of weather. If you see a pet trapped in a car showing signs of distress, like heavy panting or unconsciousness, call local law enforcement or animal control right away. An Edmonton couple busted for drug trafficking has also been charged with child endangerment. Alert Edmonton's organized crime team seized more than $300,000 worth of cocaine, vehicles, guns, and cash from 2 West Edmonton homes on May 23rd. Now, when they made the bust, they also discovered 2 young children in the homes. A 38-year-old man and a 22-year-old woman were arrested. Their names have not been released to protect the identity of the children. Police have a reminder that if you suspect drug or gang-related activity in your neighborhood, call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. The province of Saskatchewan is suing Ottawa for its share of the cleanup costs of what used to be the world's largest uranium mine. Saskatchewan says it has spent $135 million so far dealing with a gunner mine near Lake Athabasca. The mine operated until 1963. In its statement of claim, the province says the mine was federally regulated when it was established. Ottawa's statement of defense contends that Saskatchewan failed to manage the cleanup of the mine in a timely and responsible manner. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says an increase in wildfires here in Western Canada is evidence of the effects of climate change. Trudeau says real action needs to be taken, and that's why Ottawa put a price on carbon emissions despite pushback from Conservative politicians. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says BC has had a carbon tax for 10 years, and it has not prevented 2 record years for wildfires in that province. The UCP has repealed the Alberta carbon tax, and Kenney says his government will fight a federal tax when it is implemented in our province. Not only has Northern Alberta been dealing with massive wildfires, but Washington State has as well. Wildfires in that region have forced evacuations. The wildfire there has now grown to over 12 square kilometers, forcing residents in the town of Smyrna to evacuate. The sheriff's office has also told residents of the communities of Beverly, Scawana, and Wanapum Village to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. Officials say so far no homes have been consumed by fire, but some areas have reported power outages. Now here's a very scary situation. A routine helicopter rescue turned frightening when the basket carrying a 74-year-old woman began spinning wildly in the air. The elderly woman was hiking on a mountain when she was injured. She was eventually lowered to the ground and taken to a Phoenix Trauma Center by ambulance for evaluation. On June 6, 1944, around 14,000 Canadians landed on a Normandy beach codenamed Juno. It was part of an Allied invasion that marked the beginning of the end of the Second World War. Jim Parks, a rifleman with the Royal Winnipeg Rifles, landed on Juno Beach 2 minutes before the main assault wave.
And this is an actual shot of them going in. I think it's where the 8th Brigade went in, near Bernier, Shamir. And you can see they're all set. There'd be some on the beach landing party, also be somebody else with some identification signs on the what they call a beach landing party. So they stick those in the sand so the other boats could see the sign and make sure they're landing in the right place. But these are the infantry people going in, and you can see they're all pretty anxious, right? And there's a middle group go out first. There's the hedgehogs there. Yeah, there's the hedgehogs, and there's a ladder for climbing over. Now what they actually done is on each of the landing craft they put a camera with a wire going back to a battery, and the sailor was supposed to turn it on, but the seawater fouled it up. I can't really recall, but it was rough as you got near the shore. You'd see that it's quite a ways away from there.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau joined other world leaders and veterans in the British city of Portsmouth today for a ceremony on the eve of the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Canadians suffered 1,200 casualties out of the 21,400 troops who landed at Juno Beach. Another gorgeous day in the Windy City, and the warm weather and sunshine will continue. Complete weather details are on deck. Lots of warmth again today. Tonight, partly cloudy with a low near 13. Tomorrow, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 24. Friday, cooling off slightly to 17. Mainly cloudy on Saturday with a high near 15. The clouds should clear out on Sunday with a high near 18. Monday, mainly sunny again with a high of 20. Pretty much the same picture on Tuesday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 21 and an average low of 7. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1961 at 32 degrees, and the record low was 0 in 1943. Sunrise was at 5:26, sunset at 9:33. Let's see how things are shaping up across the country for tomorrow. Victoria will have light showers and 15, thunder showers and 16 is expected for Vancouver. A good chance of rain and 20 for Calgary on Thursday. Periods of rain and 15 in Edmonton. Just a few clouds and 31 is on tap for Regina tomorrow. Overcast and 26 for Saskatoon. Winnipeg will be mainly sunny and 28. Partly cloudy and 23 for Toronto. Ottawa should get up to 22 degrees. Clearing at 21 for Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick should receive rain at 17. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have thunder showers at 12. Charlottetown, PEI will also have rain at 16. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect periods of rain and a high of 14 degrees tomorrow. The Alberta government has introduced legislation that would give municipalities new powers to provide tax breaks for business. Currently, municipalities can only cancel, refund, or defer taxes. The new legislation would allow towns and cities to offer tax breaks for up to 15 years to businesses willing to set up in a commercial or industrial area. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman says the new legislation could be a good thing for our city.
Bill 7 was a surprise to municipalities and a surprise to the City of Lethbridge. We happily would work with the Government of Alberta to provide incentives to prospective investors. We think it's important to do that. We also have to be fair to existing taxpayers. So in the City of Lethbridge we have a challenge because we have a smaller than normal non-residential tax base. So about 19% of our total tax base. Residential taxpayers make up 81%. The provincial average is 25% to 75%. So we want to grow our non-residential tax base.
The UCP say the aim is to give municipalities new tools to encourage economic development in commercial areas that are vacant or underutilized. The trade battle between Canada and China continues. Not only are the Chinese not importing Canadian canola, peas, and pork, but now they've said no to our Canadian beef. Many believe it all ties into the arrest last December of the Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States. China has also since charged 2 Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, with spying. One of our regular contributors, Brian Linney, says even though China is trying to ruin our economy, we simply cannot let the Huawei executive go.
A lot of people think we should just cut Meng Wanzhou loose. This is the Huawei chief financial officer, the daughter of the founder. Just cut her loose. And then we'll get back Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor, Canadians will stop being targeted, our industries will stop being targeted. Do you really think that if we acquiesce to China now, that somehow in the future, when some other issue comes up, that they won't just say, all right, we will cripple your economy again until you acquiesce?
Mr. Lilly will also talk about how the Trudeau Liberals are wanting to spend millions of dollars on supporting abortions in foreign countries. That's coming up after business news. China has stepped up inspections of Canadian pork products. The country is concerned about African swine fever, a disease that can be devastating to pigs. Federal Agriculture Minister Marie-Claude Bibeau made the announcement yesterday. Bibeau says China has been struggling with an outbreak of swine fever, but there have been no cases of the disease in Canada. She says Chinese authorities say the additional inspection measures were partly the result of an outbreak and were also intended to combat contraband. Nutella fans can breathe a sigh of relief. Unionized workers at the world's largest Nutella factory in France have removed picket lines and are back to work. Production had been halted for a week in a dispute over salary negotiations. Factory owner Ferrero says access was reopened overnight and that normal activity has resumed. The plant produces 600,000 jars of chocolate and hazelnut spread each and every day. That's about a quarter of the world's output. And I am a big fan. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a Calgary couple found guilty in the death of their 14-month-old son has been sentenced to 32 months in prison. Jennifer and Jeremy Clark were convicted last fall of criminal negligence causing death and of failure to provide the necessaries of life. The court heard that their son John did not see a doctor until the day before he died from a staph infection in November of 2013. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has earmarked hundreds of millions of dollars towards supporting abortions around the world. And that does not sit well with many in our country, including award-winning journalist Brian Lilley. Hear what Mr. Lilley has to say next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Lethbridge Women's Connection presents Let Us Entertain You, Thursday, June 13th in the lower level of the Keg. This inspiring evening will feature a delicious dinner, live musical entertainment by the Sassay Quartet and Southern Accord Chorus, plus freelance writer and ovarian cancer survivor Kathy Mogus will share a powerful message called From Failure to Freedom. Cost is $22. For reservations, call B at 403-328-1708 or call Linda at 403-381-2574. Come celebrate with your Latin American neighbors at the Festival Latino Lethbridge 2019, taking place Saturday, June 29th, beginning at noon at Exhibition Grounds Pioneer Park. Presented by the Lethbridge Latin American Association, enjoy live entertainment, dance performances, traditional Latin food, and more. All are welcome for this free event. For details, visit llaa.ca. Easy Does It is an Al-Anon support group for adult children of alcoholics. Get an opportunity to share about your experiences with those who understand and learn healthy coping skills for your relationships. This group meets Thursdays at 7 p.m. at the Church of the Good Shepherd. For details, call Judy at 403-329-0661. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
As you may have noticed on Bridge City News, the daggers are coming out with some of our federal politicians, including our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Joining me now to talk about how campaigning is going so far with our PM is political journalist Brian Lilley. Brian, our Prime Minister promised a positive campaign, but there's been a little fear-mongering going on as we head into the fall election.
Oh, an awful lot of it, Hal. And I basically tried to sum it up. I was being a little bit sarcastic, but I said, look, the Prime Minister is basically telling Canadians now, especially women, hey, ladies, vote for me or you're all going to die in a back alley abortion if a Nazi doesn't shoot you first. You know, that's a line I put in one of my columns. And yeah, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but the Prime Minister is doing fear-mongering on issues such as abortion, on gun control, on, basically calling anyone that opposes him a Nazi, which is what his former top advisor, Jerry Butts, had done previously. If you disagreed with the Prime Minister, you were a Nazi. Well, now the Prime Minister is doing that as well. Trying to paint Andrew Scheer, the Conservative leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, as a Nazi, as a white supremacist, as someone that is just waiting around the corner to, take a minority group and, commit genocide against them. It's absolutely insane. And even Liberals have come out and said, this is not right. You shouldn't be doing this. But the Prime Minister continues because he knows that he's dropped in the polls. And one of the groups he's dropped into the polls with is women. And so he is hitting on all the hot button issues to try and scare some of those women that have gone off to the NDP or they've gone off to the Conservatives. He's trying to scare them back into the Liberal fold and say, I'm the only thing that stands between you and all those things that scare you.
Brian, there was a very awkward moment when U.S. Vice President Mike Pence was in Ottawa recently talking about the new NAFTA deal, and Trudeau brought up abortion. Were they supposed to be talking about trade and numbers?
This was supposed to be a meeting about trade, about ratifying the new NAFTA, and this goes to what I was just talking about in regards to trying to scare voters. Look, I will admit that both men used each other. The Trump administration wants to get NAFTA passed through the U.S. Congress. And so they sent Mike Pence up and he holds a nice meeting with Justin Trudeau. He says all these nice things about NAFTA and what a great progressive deal it is. And then Mike Pence goes down to the United States and says, see, it's a nice progressive deal. Justin Trudeau loves it, and tries to get the Democrats on side. Well, Justin Trudeau was using Mike Pence to kind of lecture him about abortion because you've got states like Alabama, Louisiana, and Georgia and others that have brought in different restrictions at the state level, which the Trump administration has no sway over. They brought in different restrictions on abortion, and Trudeau starts lecturing them on it. Why? Well, it has nothing to do with NAFTA, but it does have to do with that fear mongering that I was just talking about, to try and say to women who, let's face it, the Liberals like to think that all women in Canada are pro-abortion. If you follow the polling, if you follow the stats, that's not true. Women are as likely to be pro-life as they are pro-abortion. But Trudeau just wants the ones that are in favor of it, as he calls it, pro-choice. He wants them to be in his camp. So this was all about domestic politicking. It had nothing to do with actually taking the United States to task.
Brian, many people believe that Canada cannot buckle to China on Huawei or on anything else for that matter. I must stand with our biggest trading partner, Washington. I mean, first it was canola, then peas, pork, and now China's messing with our beef exports?
Yeah, this is the latest move from China, is that they're saying that, there's some paperwork problems and we've got to inspect every shipment of beef that comes in. So not just a container, like the giant shipping containers that we see on the backs of trucks, that we see on the giant ships that cross the Pacific, that cross the Atlantic. We've got to inspect down to the box level. Well, this is going to cause an awful lot of extra cost. It's going to cause an awful lot of extra delays. You have to worry of, will the product survive? All of that. Well, now Canadian beef is the latest target. This comes back to Huawei. A lot of people think we should just cut Meng Wanzhou loose. This is the Huawei chief financial officer, the daughter of the founder. Just cut her loose. And then we'll get back Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor, Canadians will stop being targeted, our industries will stop being targeted. Do you really think that if we acquiesce to China now, that somehow in the future, when some other issue comes up, that they won't just say, all right, we will cripple your economy again until you acquiesce? No, we've got to be able to stand up with China. The United States is right to look at what's going on with Huawei. There are national security concerns, not only for Canada, but for the United States, for New Zealand, Australia, for Britain, our Five Eyes partners. We've got to be worried about what China is doing. They want to have Huawei central to our next generation telecommunications. That's what this is about. We may think it's about canola. We may think it's about peas or beef or pork. And if you're a farmer, a producer in those areas, yeah, this is going to hurt you. But no, they want to have access to our next generation wireless technology so that they can just use their technology to create backdoors to siphon off all of our national security information. And we can't have that happening. That's what this fight is really about. It's a fight for global dominance between the United States and China. And as much as some people may dislike Donald Trump, who do you want leading the world? Do you want the Americans, where Donald Trump could be gone in 2 years or in 6 years? Or do you want China, where it is the same group of people, regardless of who's actually in charge? It's the same Politburo who is going to do it, and they'll do it based on what's best for them, not on any international rules of order.
Brian, a judge in Quebec may have ordered SNC-Lavalin to stand trial on bribery and corruption charges, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll actually happen. Tell me more about that.
So the Quebec court ruled that SNC should go to trial, but David Lametti, the Attorney General who replaced Jody Wilson-Raybould, has made it clear that, look, the idea of a deferred prosecution agreement still on the table. He is still open to doing that. Okay, so where do we go from there? What do we do next? Do we know what the government will do? And the answer is we simply don't. So Justin Trudeau and his government could offer SNC-Lavalin the sweetheart deal that they've been looking for to get out of bribery and corruption charges at any moment. They can actually offer this up, Hal, any moment between now and the day that, if they go to trial, the judge is ready to render their verdict. They could go through an entire trial, and sometimes after these trials, it will take 6 months for the judge to render the verdict. It could be the day before the judge is going to, hand down the decision, guilty or innocent, and the government could come in and say, we give them a deferred prosecution agreement. That whole trial is null and void. Basically, the Trudeau Liberals are saying this is still on the table, and they're claiming it's about jobs. As you and I have discussed before, This claim that if we don't give SNC this sweetheart deal, that 9,000 jobs will disappear has been debunked. It's been debunked by myself. It's been debunked by the likes of the CBC, a very liberal-friendly media organization. It has been debunked by everyone, but they keep bringing it forward. This is about politics. It's not about business. It's not about reality, and it is certainly not about justice.
Brian, the Alberta carbon tax is no more, but wait, a federal carbon tax may be coming to a province near you, including here in Alberta. And Trudeau says the federal carbon tax will help deal with extreme weather events like the Northern Alberta fires, but won't another tax just add fuel to the fire?
Well, this is an absolutely bizarre thing, and I was a little bit surprised to see the Prime Minister jump in on this week. Catherine McKenna, his Environment Minister, had made similar comments, saying, "Oh, but if we had a carbon tax, it would fight the wildfires." Well, I'm sorry, the wildfires started before Jason Kenney, the new Premier of Alberta, canceled the carbon tax. So, the carbon tax has been around a couple years. Did it stop the wildfires? I'm pretty sure you had wildfires last year and the year before that, and every single year, just like every northern part of this country. You go across Canada, you have northern British Columbia, northern Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick. Every part of the country has wildfires. It is part of the ecosystem. But somehow, Justin Trudeau and Catherine McKenna are going to magically claim that, well, we're having the wildfires because Jason Kenney canceled the carbon tax. That is nothing but an outright lie, and it is beneath both of them. But, I've been maintaining for a long time now that Justin Trudeau doesn't want to campaign in the next election against Andrew Scheer. He wants to campaign against the likes of Jason Kenney, against Scott Moe in Saskatchewan, against Doug Ford here in Ontario. That's what he wants to do. This is about Justin Trudeau's re-election campaign. It's not actually about the environment.
Now, good news for Alberta's energy sector is that the Senate committee says that Bill C-48, the tanker ban bill, is just plain wrong.
Well, it's good news if the rest of Parliament will, hold true to that. The committee has said that. What will the rest of the quote unquote independent senators do? The so-called independent senators have been voting at a level more in line with Trudeau Liberals than senators that actually identify themselves as Liberals still. If you remember, Justin Trudeau kicked all the senators out of his Liberal caucus, but there are still a number that identify themselves as Liberals. They're more independent than the so-called independents who now hold sway in the Senate. So the committee has said this. Will the rest of the Senate? I'm not sure. The C-48 tanker ban bill was essentially brought in without study. This is a government that said that they would, base policy on science, on evidence, on the facts, and then brought in an effective ban that killed off the Northern Gateway pipeline even before this bill. Now they're trying to do the same. Anyone that knows anything about the oil industry knows that there are tankers that go up and down the west coast of British Columbia on a daily basis that are carrying oil from where? Places like Alaska to Washington State to California. And those tankers go through the same waters that we're banning our own tankers going through. We can't stop the Americans from going from Alaska to California, but we're going to stop them from going from British Columbia to China or India, where we could have them, drop off even dirtier fuels like coal. Unfortunately, the Trudeau Liberals said they were all about science, they were all about evidence, they were all about facts. That hasn't turned out to be the case.
Brian, the new report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls was submitted to the government. Many are calling it a genocide. Even here on Bridge City News, almost every week I'm posting pictures and having stories of missing Aboriginal women in our community. Trudeau says the focus must be on the response.
Yeah, and at first he would not use the term genocide. When he first received the report, he did not use that term, even though he's accepted the idea of cultural genocide in the past. But then again, at an event in Vancouver, he did say, no, we accept the term genocide. That is not popular with all the premiers. It's not popular with all the political leaders across the country. And quite frankly, from my own perspective, Hal, I'm not sure how it actually deals with as the Prime Minister had previously said, the response. How does that improve anybody's life? So the Premier of Quebec has said, in his view, that this was not a genocide, that it was something awful, and that we need to fix it. The Premier of Ontario has, kind of sidestepped the issue and said, well, we'll read the report, we'll read the facts, but he's not calling it that yet. Different premiers have had different responses. Look, there's a lot that was at play in terms of how the commission would look at the findings. And unfortunately, I think they went for a very politicized one. An awful lot of the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in Canada died at the hands of Indigenous men. And so far, at least what I've seen in the media reports on this, they have not dealt with that fact. You cannot blame the government for everything when much of it happened within the community that's claiming genocide. So we've got to be able to say, were there policies that were detrimental? Absolutely. Were there problems within that respective community? We need to be also able to say, absolutely, and have an honest adult conversation. Are we able to do that in this current political climate? I'm not sure.
Brian, our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced billions of dollars in Canadian foreign aid, including money for contraception, legal abortion, and sex education around the world. That may stir the pot with some of our voters.
It absolutely may. And I remember when Stephen Harper first announced the Millennium Development Goals, and that Canada was going to champion the issues of child and maternal health. And I said, okay, well, how will you be doing that? And I kind of stirred the pot. This is around 2008, 2009, probably 2009, as Canada's getting set to host the G10, the G8 back then, and the G20. And I said, well, how will you be doing that? Will you be funding abortion? And some people were aghast that I would even ask that. And some people came forward and said, we can reduce child mortality by 20%. And I said, how? And they said, by funding abortion worldwide. This was the Canadian equivalent of Planned Parenthood. And I said, I don't think you understand what reducing child mortality is if you're saying you can reduce it by 20% through funding abortion. The Harper government said, we're not going to go into countries where abortion is illegal and fund it. We're not going to push this on other countries. If they want to fund it, they can go ahead, but our goal is to help mothers and children survive past the age of 5. The Trudeau government has a very different point of view. They believe that we should be funding abortion even in countries that don't fully accept it. This is going to be a hot button issue for a number of people. It's also going to create some animosity between our donor countries that we are giving foreign aid to, and the Canadian government, because some of them do not want to accept funds for these issues. If this was any other issue, we would be calling this cultural colonialism, Hal. But because it's abortion, the Liberals don't see it that way.
One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
Joining me now in studio is Dr. Clayton Coggino. He's a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Meridian Integrated Health and Wellness Center. He's also done some training in conventional medicine with a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science Kinesiology and 3 years of research on radiation and cancer at the University of Lethbridge. And today, we're going to chat about some digestive health concerns. Dr. Coggino, welcome back to BCN.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's chat a bit about the difference with irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel, and celiac. What's the difference between the three?
So let's start with celiac. Celiac is an autoimmune condition. So it's diagnosed through something called an anti-TTG or an actual biopsy of the intestine. That's the most accurate. It's autoimmune, so it's very severe, and it means that you cannot have gluten. Zero gluten in anything, even something so simple as like having a toaster with bread would cause, basically it's a depletion of the, they're called microvilli. They allow you to absorb nutrients in your small intestine, and it basically destroys them. Wow. So it's really severe. Inflammatory bowel disease is different than irritable bowel. Irritable bowel, you get off and on pain, bloating, and just more mild symptoms like constipation, diarrhea, stuff like that, that's more mild, whereas inflammatory bowel, that's usually an autoimmune, which is much more severe. It's a little bit harder to diagnose, and the symptoms can be a lot more detrimental to your health.
So what would actually cause IBS or irritable bowel syndrome?
Yeah, so that's probably the most common thing that I see. Irritable bowel syndrome, it can be caused by a lot of things. One of the main things that we see as naturopathic doctors that causes it is food intolerances. Now, a lot of other things can cause it. Stress is another huge one. When you're really stressed out, which most people are very stressed out in today's society, it shuts off the digestive tract, shuts off the digestive juices and secretions that allow us to digest food. So when that happens, food doesn't digest properly. It kind of sits there or it becomes stagnant and it starts irritating the gut. When that happens, food can get through into your bloodstream without being properly digested, and that can activate an immune reaction called an immunoglobulin G reaction, which then your body can send systemically everywhere, creating a wide variety of symptoms.
So how do we actually fix irritable bowel syndrome? Is it a lot of the foods that we're ingesting? Stay away from those foods?
Yeah, so beyond a food allergy, beyond stress, you can also have things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. How do you fix it? It really depends on what the cause or causes of the problems are, right? And so a lot of times I'll run a blood test, a food allergy test. It usually tests 120 foods, although you can do extended panels. And by eliminating a lot of the foods that might be causing that irritation or inflammation, you'll fully resolve your symptoms. If it's something like candida overgrowth or fungal overgrowth, then you can take different nutraceuticals to kill that candida, maybe go on a specific diet to kill it. And if it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, it's a very similar situation to candida, although the protocol slightly changes.
Why do you think that is? Like when I was a child, I don't know if you were the same way, but I could eat and drink everything.
Right.
No reaction, no allergic reaction, no irritable bowel syndrome. But now that I'm a little bit older, I can't really drink milk anymore, milk products, right?
Yeah.
So lactose intolerant, and all these other things pop up, and food allergies.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, so lactose intolerance, about 80% of our population is lactose intolerant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to come across someone that can really tolerate a dairy product well. There's a lot of ways of getting around a lactose intolerance. That's to sugar. That's basically your inability to digest the lactose, sugar found in dairy. Why it happens as you get older, I think it's just we're exposed to a lot of toxins, we're exposed to a lot of stress. Things start not working quite as well as they used to. Perhaps we get dysbiotic flora, or by that I mean bacteria that might be unhealthy. We take antibiotics, so it kills off good bacteria and allows bad bacteria to come in, or maybe even just fungal overgrowth to come in. So there's a lot of different reasons why, as we age, we start seeing more irritable bowel syndrome, but it certainly can still happen a lot in kids and even like very young children too.
I notice as you get older, maybe it's the older body parts. Kind of like your car, starts breaking down, right?
It starts breaking down.
Time for some new body parts.
That's right.
Now, how common is celiac?
Celiac's actually more common than you think. It's more undiagnosed than you think. I diagnose it quite a lot through blood work in my clinic, or I'll refer back to their medical doctor to do the testing as well. But yeah, it's a lot more common, and usually people with celiac present with slightly more severe symptoms, digestive tract pain. However, sometimes they just present with bloating. So often I'll, at the same time as testing food allergies or SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, candida, stuff like that, I'll just run a quick blood work for celiac just to rule it out, because it's so severe. You really have to do your due diligence when you're ruling out or looking into digestive tract
Any
problems.
chance of misdiagnosing someone, perhaps?
So the
There's
test,
a lot of similarities with it. Right?
Yeah, no, because when we're doing lab testing, the lab testing is medically accredited. It's an objective lab test. We're sending it away to a lab. The testing itself inherently could potentially be slightly inaccurate. Like, I think a celiac test is about 98% accurate. Okay. So if we're really certain that this person has celiac and it comes back negative, we may want to retest again, or even get them to do a biopsy, which is not ideal and certainly not the first thing to do, but sometimes it has to be done.
I've heard of the expression, doctor, leaky gut.
Yes.
I've got a leaky gut. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so or it's leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability.
I'll stick with leaky gut.
Yeah, stick with leaky gut. It's
Okay.
easier to say. But that is essentially where your gut becomes inflamed. The cells in your gut become inflamed and they start to splay open a little bit. There's junctions that hold them together called gap junctions and tight junctions that hold your cells of your small intestine together. When those become inflamed, they can open up a little bit and then they allow the food particles that you eat to go through them instead of going through the cell properly. And when your food doesn't get down to the size that it should be, your body sees a big hunk of celery protein, for example, and it sees it as foreign and it attacks it. And that's where leaky gut can cause a whole wide variety of symptoms, like not just gut pain or IBS, but it can cause like asthma, it can cause fatigue after you eat, it can cause rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, acne, a whole bunch of different things.
Is there anything that we can do to actually flush out our system outside of water?
So to me, it's more first initially figure out what the problem is by doing testing. Eliminate the food so it takes some pressure off your gut, off your digestive tract, and then go on a very small and short-term gut healing protocol, something like a high-dose omega with EPA. It's the anti-inflammatory component of an omega-3 or fish oil. A really high dose of that, and then something else called glutamine, L-glutamine. And it is an amino acid. It's the most abundant amino acid in our bodies. And it actually binds the enterocytes, or the gut cells, back together.
How much does stress impact our overall gut health?
Hugely. Stress stops your digestive flow. It stops the motility. It's a massive component of it. Absolutely.
And what about probiotics? We touched on them a little bit earlier. How important are they to our overall health as well?
Probiotics, they're hit and miss. They're often overused, actually.
Oh.
A lot of times people don't understand that a probiotic can be detrimental to your health as well. And so overall, probiotics are very good, and for sure people can take them. But for example, if you have candida or a fungal overgrowth and you take a probiotic with a sugar in it called fructooligosaccharides, or FOS, you'll make that problem way worse. You'll feel a lot worse. So a lot of patients that I see, they'll come in and they'll say, why do I feel so bad after I took this probiotic? And then we'll do some testing on them and say, you actually have candida. Similarly, with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, if you take a probiotic, you're adding to the good, healthy bacteria that have migrated from your large intestine into your small intestine, and it'll make your symptoms way worse.
So if we actually did need a probiotic in our diet, instead of the capsules or tablets, what natural foods could we ingest?
Well, you can ingest yogurt, although it's more for maintenance. Kombucha is the same thing.
Is it like the non-sugary yogurt? Because I like the nice thick Greek yogurt with all the sugars.
I don't think it really matters.
It doesn't matter?
No,
Oh.
but the sugar itself probably isn't good for you.
Well, that's the tasty part.
I know,
You got to
right?
work with me
Well,
on this.
hey, you got to have some give and take, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, probiotics, fantastic.
Cottage cheese,
they're
would
good.
you have anything in there? Maybe not cottage cheese.
No,
No?
no,
It's more
not
the
really.
yogurts?
Yeah, cottage cheese will have a lot of lactose in it.
Right,
Might upset
right,
your
yeah.
stomach.
Yeah, well, but for me, it would. You're right, absolutely. Okay, what about heartburn? Lots of people get it, or was it gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD?
Yeah,
You know, a lot of
GERD, yeah.
people have that. I've heard that apple cider vinegar may actually help with that naturally.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so apple cider vinegar, the reason why it might help for some people, because heartburn can be a little bit complex, but it would help in the instance that you actually had low stomach acid. And that wouldn't allow, so sometimes patients, as we age, we actually decrease our stomach acid production.
Oh.
So a lot of times patients will come in and say, it just kind of started, now I'm getting heartburn. Well, a lot of times it has to do with the fact that you're getting low stomach acid and it's not allowing the sphincter to close off. So that any bit of stomach acid that is present in your stomach is splashing up into your esophagus. In cases like that, if somebody takes something acidic, like apple cider vinegar and even HCl pill, their symptoms of bloating or heartburn will fully go away.
Wow.
In the case that somebody has an ulcer, that would make them much, much, much worse in the fact that then they would have to take a Tums or some type of antacid to neutralize that immediately. Otherwise, they do more damage. So you got to be a little careful with it.
Now, how would you diagnose digestive tract issues?
Just in general,
Yeah.
digestive tract, I would do lab testing. Yeah, absolutely. To me, that's the number one. I mean, we take a really detailed history of the patient, which is extremely important. And from that, we can base, okay, which lab tests do we think we need to do?
Do
Because
they come back within a week? Like how soon do you get
you
results?
typically, between a few days to a couple weeks, depending on the lab that we use, how in depth it is. But yeah, lab testing is really key because the digestive tract is really compartmentalized. So the stomach has certain symptoms, the liver has certain symptoms that can cause digestive issues, large intestine, small intestine, they all have different lab tests associated with them and symptoms associated with them.
Now, what about a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth?
Yes.
How does that affect your overall gut health, or SIBO, I guess?
Yeah, so SIBO, is
right.
what we call it,
Okay.
Or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it is where bacteria, which normally inhabit the large intestine, that's where they should be, that's where they're healthy, but they've moved into the wrong spot. And they've moved into the wrong spot for a lot of reasons. Usually it's retroactive flow if somebody's sick or something like that, but surgeries can do it. There's a lot of different reasons. SIBO, we can diagnose it with a breath test, actually. That's the most accurate way to diagnose it. Yeah, it's the gold standard. And SIBO, basically what it does is it can cause either IBS in general or really bad constipation, really bad, not usually diarrhea, but usually really bad constipation and bloating. Bloating is a huge symptom of it. And the reason is because when you eat food and it goes into your small intestine, you have now a bunch of bacteria that shouldn't be there that eat your food. So you're not getting the nutrients that you should be getting because the bacteria are eating it, and they're producing hydrogen gas or methane gas because they're eating the food.
So how would you actually treat SIBO then?
So really you have to kill the good healthy bacteria that are in the wrong spot. Wow. So that's where if you took a probiotic and you had SIBO, you're just adding healthy bacteria to the wrong spot. And you're never going to fix it. You can also do something called a low FODMAP diet. So there are certain sugars that will feed that bacteria. It won't fix the problem per se, but it will decrease a lot of your symptoms. But certain herbs, actually herbs and antibiotics have been studied extensively. The herbs actually work just as good as the antibiotics do, and the antibiotics unfortunately won't kill the methane producing bacteria. They'll only kill the hydrogen producing bacteria. So often I'll use a combination of the two, or just herbs to kill it. You can also do something called an elemental diet.
Okay.
And it's called a physician's elemental diet because it is a tricky one to do. It is a liquid diet for 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
Fully nutritious, like it supplies your body with every nutritional need that it needs, but it's a liquid diet.
Interesting, fascinating.
Yeah.
How would you help a pregnant woman with her gut health? And more specifically, because you're actually helping 2 people.
Yes.
Or maybe even more if she has twins.
Yeah,
right?
Yep, that's a good point. You have to be a little bit careful with that because I don't like guessing. That's where testing really comes in because you don't ever want to tell a kid or someone that's pregnant who needs those nutrients to eliminate a food without actually knowing that they need to eliminate a food. So I would do a food allergy panel on them or a food sensitivity panel on them, tell them exactly what might be irritating their digestive tract, and then be really careful with respect to what supplements we put them on because certain supplements would be more contraindicated in pregnancy, and after pregnancy then we can treat it a little bit more aggressively. But
before I let you go, I want to ask you a bit about seniors and how you help a lot of seniors with their gut health. Yeah. What are some of the major issues you're seeing when seniors come see you?
It's a good question. Honestly, it's very similar. Digestive tract issues, as you just said, they kind of almost become a little bit more prevalent as we age. Mm-hmm. I think with seniors, one of the biggest things is actually malnutrition. A lot of times seniors aren't really eating a healthful diet or enough. It seems like a lot of times appetite decreases or maybe their gut is just in pain. And so just kind of working through that with them is probably the most common thing that I see.
Dr. Clayton Coggino, naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Meridian Integrated Health and Wellness Center. Thanks a lot for joining me again in studio.
Thanks again for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. Be well, God bless, and have a great night.